Welcome, guys. Thanks for being here today on our InfoSec Trends little talk show. We wanted to kind of bring you guys on today and talk about the topic of SOC 2 reports and how they're all not created equal. There's a lot of noise in this space, and I figured no better way than to just have a conversation. I know you guys have a little experience in this world. So why don't we just start off by, Stas, maybe introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Great. My name is Stas Bojoukha. I'm the founder and CEO of Compyl. I've been in the information security space, pretty much forever. I have a degree in the space, and I've been a CISO in multiple organizations, predominantly focused on financial services. But I've been around the space for a long time.
Very cool. So you've been involved with a SOC 2 audit before?
I've been involved with SOC 2s well before they were even called SOC 2s. I think the first one was like an SSA 16, like 15 years ago, when no one had any idea what the hell any of this stuff was.
That's funny. And Simon, welcome. Thanks for being here. Maybe give us a little background on yourself as well.
So I'm the co-founder of Compyl. I work with Stas. I started my security career in managed service providers. I worked in a diverse range of different companies across the Asia Pacific region. I've worked in a CISO position for a while. Been in the IT security industry for about 20 years, primarily focused around policy governance, risk and compliance, with a little bit of a kicker in the technical stuff as well. So that's about it for me. That's sort of where I sit.
Cool. So you as well have been through a SOC 2 audit, are familiar with the space?
Yeah. This is bread and butter for us. So.
Well, that's why I kind of wanted to have this chat with you guys, because there's so much noise in this space today. 2022, organizations are trying to get secure for multiple reasons, and it seems like this SOC 2 report, the pursuit of a SOC 2, has become a little more common conversation going on in organizations, all the way from like a startup to a small to medium size, and obviously in the enterprise world. But why don't we just start at the beginning? Stas, maybe just talk to us about a SOC 2, type 1, a type 2, what the difference is, what the purpose is, and then we can kind of go from there.
Sure. So a SOC 1, a SOC 1 is financial reporting related. A SOC 2 is information security related, and a SOC 3 is essentially a summary of either one or two that can be shared out for a customer. Both SOC 1 and SOC 2s are you have a type 1 and a type 2. Type 1 is a moment in time. Type 2 is traditionally done over a period of time, about 6 months in length from what's called an observation period. So once all of the controls are in place, you kick off the observation period. And when a third-party auditor comes in, they take a look at everything that you've been doing for the past 6 months, and they either sign off what you've been doing, or they note some nonconformities in your reports.
Very cool. And Simon, what are some of the what are some of the motivating factors, right, when it comes to an organization wanting to pursue that SOC 2? I know, I'm sure they range, right? Like maybe there's like a fancy piece of new marketing and sales material, but then also there's probably organizations that actually really like value and need to get secure and have confidence in their kind of infrastructure. Maybe talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so SOC 2s serve several functions, right? I think the first and foremost is it validates the execution of your security program within your organization. It shows that your security program is up to snuff, that you're providing adequate levels of security to both your key stakeholders internally and then your external stakeholders, your customers, right? The second thing it does is it validates that the execution that you are making is okay for your customers as a vendor. It shows that you can operate effectively as a vendor from a security perspective and protect their data. They're primarily the 2 points that people go after SOC 2s for.
That's interesting. And there's this, I think like what I find and kind of reading into the space is there is this thought or this idea that like all SOC 2 reports aren't really created equal. You have this like rush and get it done method, and then you have maybe a more mature and robust method. Is the kind of how would you look at that from like the method that you're going about achieving that SOC 2? Is it the audit part? What kind of change makes them not equal? Stas, maybe you could talk about that.
Sure, I'm happy to talk about that. Traditionally, SOC 2s were reserved for large organizations. They tend to be quite costly, especially if you're working with the Big Four, to get them accredited. The main challenge here is actually designing the framework around not even the SOC 2, but around like any security framework. So getting things in place like policy, standards, procedures would be one of the first fundamental things that needs to be done. There's a lot of people going out and buying endpoint solutions and trying to get easy wins. Unfortunately, a lot of the stuff that needs to be done in order to achieve a SOC 2 or another a similar accreditation is a lot of just putting in fundamentals in place in an organization. So like policy, standards, procedures, like I mentioned, making sure that you've got change management, you've got risk management, that you have a general idea of what you need to do as an organization to handle incidents and handle an ever-changing environment, especially in the security space. A lot of this stuff is really not sexy. There's a lot of work that needs to go into it. Policies can take a long time, but once those policies are designed, you then have to implement them. But those policies have to be meaningful. They have to be well thought out, and then they need to be implemented and then tracked. This process is not easy, it requires expertise and quite a bit of handholding. But once it's in place, you have a robust platform in the organization that can be built upon.
And can I just interject there? What we do find is that some organizations try and cut corners, right? Yeah. Like let's not beat around the bush. Some try and cut corners, and they do that by reducing the scope. The scope of the audit. We're not auditing everything in our environment. We're only auditing the stuff that we think is important. And they might only audit a reduced control set, or only look at empty policy, right? Policies that do the bare minimum, not necessarily protect the organization. So when you go out and you view that SOC 2 report as somebody that's hiring a vendor, you're looking at a SOC 2 report that may be clean. But if you look a little bit deeper, you can see that it's really focused on something that's unrelated to your business, or it's focusing on controls that you don't necessarily care about, right?
Or there's controls that are just being satisfied directly by policy that is unenforceable from a technical perspective or process of people perspective.
It's interesting because I after reading into this space and this concept of SOC 2s aren't all created equal, what's interesting is at the end, right? Like at the end of this process, an organization that is SOC 2 accredited versus another small to medium sized business that's SOC 2 accredited, right? Like they seem on the surface that they're even, that it's the same thing. But if you kind of peel back and look into the details, and maybe one organization, let's just say for example, went through the process of actually generating like custom policies, right? And then another organization used generic policies. It seems that there's inherent risk just kind of speeding through this, and then it almost defeats the purpose of the entire exercise.
100%. I mean, like I'll give you a really good example here, right? Most organizations use G Suite, right? They use Google Drive, they use Gmail. But how we use Google Drive versus how you use Google Drive as a separate organization is completely different. We might not store any confidential data because we use Dropbox as our data repository, whereas you might use Google Drive all the time, and all of your data goes in there, and and you're building third-party apps over top of it. So you're letting third parties access your data. The controls that you put in place are going to be completely different between what I'm putting in place and what you're putting in place. to put blanket controls over something like that without even thinking about it, or reporting on KPIs or stats that you're interconnected into G Suite, but you don't actually know what the data is being pulled, or being able to quantify it, is just noise. It doesn't add any value, and it adds no security. If anything, it adds. It adds a. It's a false sense of security that you're adding here,
and it's an unknown amount of risk, right? Like, and then you start thinking about executing your SOC 2, and one of the main components of SOC 2 is risk management. So now you're stuck looking at an organization, applying it to your company, and sitting there and going, well, there is an unknown amount of risk here because we just don't know, what levels of security are where. So, SOC 2s are only important. They're only important and they're only useful when you understand the full gamut of information that's been tested, how well it's been tested, and by who, and the controls that are actually being tested are validated to be executed over that testing period, right? Without that, it's a useless piece of paper. And there are so many organizations that take vendor management and go, okay, there's the SOC 2 with this company, they're now low risk because they're following a framework. But you open up the curtain and you can see that it's just not worth the paper that it's written on.
Yeah, and if anything, I think we should just coin this right here. Like these are SOC 2 lights, because a real SOC 2. A real SOC 2 takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of due diligence, a lot of discussion, right? Like another example, right? You mentioned, risk management. Risk management, it looks completely different from organization to organization. Some organizations require enterprise level risk registers and risk management committees, and full documentation about how they came up with their, risk mitigation strategies, and that takes work. So that takes work. You can definitely streamline it and make it as efficient as possible. But you have to understand how that organization operates. If you're filling out, equivalent of an Excel sheet with some risks on it, and then you're putting a finger in the air, putting some likelihood and impact on it to satisfy an audit report, that's not risk management. And that type of stuff is really important for an organization, because if they're not focused on the things that matter, or they don't know the things that matter, they're never going to be able to put the fundamentals in, they'll never be able to put the fundamentals in place to protect their data. And you can buy all the endpoint solutions in the entire world, but if you don't know what you're protecting, it all falls by the wayside.
So I guess a lot of something that I'm thinking about is the red flags in this whole kind of process, and I think it stems from going back to what we were originally talking about, the motivation. What's the motivation? So if maybe someone on your sales team is approaching a founder, a co-founder, and they're saying, hey, I'm trying to close these deals, but I keep getting asked if we have a SOC 2. And
this is where this whole thing is a perpetual cycle of nonsense, right? You have these companies that are going out that are getting SOC 2 lights in order to satisfy audit requirements or customer requirements, and they're making it harder for everybody else that's actually gone through the processes of putting robust controls in place and making sure that they're doing the right thing. And these reports are coming out, and they're not they're not worth the paper they're written on, and they're devaluing this industry to the point where they're going to be worthless, and we're going to have to move to another standard entirely with even more stringent controls and more overhead, because this process has now been so devalued.
That's
it's basically a joke of, right? That's
he said what we were all thinking.
So the reality of going out and getting a SOC 2 light, as Stas says, is that it's only ever going to come unstuck in 6, 12, 18 months time, when a company that you're preparing a pitch for or something or a proposal for turns around and goes, you know what, this isn't worth the paper that it's written on. I'm going to get redo it.
Show me your policy and show me how you enforce it.
Well, I think part of the issue though here, right, is it going back, and I'm sorry to kind of belabor this, but it's the motivation. Because I think for some founders, like I don't come from a technical background, right? So like I feel like I'm not saying I can relate, but I can understand a founder who is unaware maybe and not kind of knowing what the risk he's treading on by going after and pursuing a SOC 2 light. But in reality, it's like one of those things where you really got to read up and kind of come up to speed or surround yourself or bring on somebody on your team that can educate you of what that risk actually is. Because I think some people barrel down this road and they're not even aware.
I mean, go on, Simon.
So you're exactly right. The awareness of SOC 2, it really is the buzzword at the moment, right?
Yeah.
Like everybody's going out and getting a SOC 2 so that they can compete, and the motivation isn't there to protect the organization. Right. And that's the primary objective of SOC 2, is to protect your organization and validate that you've got the appropriate processes and execution in place to be able to protect that customer's data. But by getting a SOC 2 light, you're just making a joke of the system. So I guess the moral of this whole discussion is to ensure that when you are going for a SOC 2, that you are doing it for the right reasons, that you're getting the full value out of a SOC 2 execution, and that you're improving your security posture so that in 12 months' time, if you do get audited and you do have to validate your controls, that you're just not going backwards and having to, redo it over and over again because you're failing those control audits, right?
Yeah. But on top of that, like, things change so rapidly, especially like, small, medium-sized businesses, like they're changing all the time, right? They're introducing new technology, they're introducing new processes, new people, all like things are happening really, really quickly. I mean, the need to change, the control sets for like, or to adjust controls on a SOC 2 is pretty common, right? Like that. I mean, that's what all the continuous improvement is all about, is that need to constantly grow the business and make changes and enhancements, and then be able to capture that and put the appropriate controls in place and being able to track them. Like a blanket approach it doesn't work. It doesn't work as a checkbox.
Yeah.
Well, it does if you've got one product and you're very simplistic in your execution. But when you add that complexity, that's when you really need to think about how that execution of that SOC is going to happen. Right. You've really got to think about how you're going to execute that security program, because it's not just one application, it's not just one product. It is a plethora of different products across. Yeah, it's just yeah.
So it kind of makes me wonder if there's been this kind of little loophole in this process that's kind of emerged, right, to kind of expedite this process, achieve your SOC 2 light. Do either of you believe that there will be a new standard to that maybe can't be rigged or can't be jigged, or is it up to the organization to really just kind of come up to speed and understand the value of a SOC 2 and go about it maybe in a more secure way to ultimately reduce their risk, right? Like I guess that's what I wonder.
Yeah, I mean, like ultimately, like SOC 2 or ISO or high trust or HIPAA, or HIPAA you have to comply with, GDPR you have to comply with, but like this is all stuff that that you should be putting in place after the fact, that you've invested the proper time and due diligence into satisfying your own requirements, right? Like, what are you as an organization worried about? Like, where, like, how do you protect yourself and like protect your business, right? There's an incentive here for people to do this without any accreditation over top. Like, how do you protect your customers' data? Like, this security is an investment and it is a necessity.
Especially today, yeah.
Shouldn't be enforced through a piece of paper. Like, you need to work with teams that understand your business, that can help you achieve your strategic goal and allow you to scale your business securely and efficiently.
Yeah.
And the piece of paper is the afterthought. It's the validation that you're executing.
Validation that you've done something correctly.
Right. And I think that and go back to your point there, Daniel, I think that it's important to understand that it's not just the responsibility of the business, but it's the responsibility of the auditors as well, right?
Yeah.
It's the ethical approach. You've got to make sure that you're validating just as correctly and true as the people that are actually executing the SOC 2 in the company.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's a good point too. One last thing, from the startup world that, and maybe even the small to medium sized business, I don't know that this is going on as much in the enterprise level, because I think their risk appetite is just so much smaller. But when you're a little scrappy startup and you're growing, I think part of the challenge here too is like the barrier to entry of like one of the big four being your auditors, right? There's a cost barrier here. Kind of going about this in this major robust way. There's dollars associated to it.
Absolutely.
So how do you think a startup or a small to medium sized business needs to kind of think about that, where they're allocating dollars and how to achieve
there's
it?
There's lots of ways to do this without a SOC too, right? I mean, like, the main driving one of the main focuses for SOC 2 is the reduced amount of vendor due diligence from third parties, right? But if we're talking like, there are SOC 2s that we do or that we're involved with are very thorough and definitely reduce our customers' overhead quite a bit in terms of vendor assessment. But there are some vendors that no matter what, they come back and they have additional questions, they want clarification. That's inevitable. But there are other frameworks that like ATIC and SIG, just to name two right off the top of my head, that like are pretty well regarded. They're very thorough. There's different levels of them, and they don't require any accreditation. They just require that you're upfront and honest about what you have in place and what they are expecting you to do. And there's some flex there, but that doesn't require any type of investment. That's free, apart from a small annual charge from these companies about using their framework. But like that has been the way that it's been done traditionally until you get to a point where you can afford a SOC 2, a credible auditing firm.
Yeah.
The other thing too is that if you look at the investment that you've got to make from a small or medium, enterprise business, whatever you want to call yourselves, right? Perspective, you don't go out and spend your money showing somebody that you're capable. You spend your money being capable, right? You've got to have that capability before you prove that you've got that capability. So irrespective of whether or not you're going to get a SOC 2 or not, or, any other accreditation, you need to build that framework. You need to build that foundational control before you do that. So go out and spend your money on building that control and validate it through those methods that Stas pointed out there, using SIG or whatever, right? By doing that, you're protecting your data. And that's the primary objective here.
Yeah.
Nothing else matters.
And I guess in kind of closing, part of I think this chatter and this discussion around like all SOC 2s aren't created equal, maybe barrier to entry with dollars, I think it's also a shift in the way people are thinking about this stuff, because like what's at risk is your entire business, right? Your reputation, maybe cost, data, right? Like, so the barrier to entry and the cost of maybe doing this in an expedited fashion, maybe on the back end, you're going to wish you just went about this in a more secure way.
Absolutely, you're just gonna end up doing the work twice. That's all that's going to end up happening. Like, this really isn't a checkbox, right? Like, you as an organization, you need to understand where your risks lie and how you protect your own data. Because like one security breach or one data breach, like your reputation's shot. And you're going to lose all of your customers if you don't get sued into the ground. It's and no piece of paper is going to protect you from that. Like, it's not going to happen.
Right. Yeah. SOC doesn't give you the tick box that says you can't be breached anymore, right?
Right.
Like we said before, all it is a piece of paper. So you need those controls in place.
It's funny.
And that is a risk mitigation exercise.
So,
You define the risk and then you mitigate it based on the fact that the impact is going to be larger than the mitigation cost. So that's what you need to do. You need to mitigate that risk through proper security control.
So you're saying, as an organization, you get breached, customers stop dropping, starting to email your SOC 2 report over to your customers saying like, oh no, we had a SOC 2. That's not going to save them from leaving?
No difference whatsoever. No difference whatsoever.
This is good. Cool. Well, guys, thank you so much for kind of jumping in and having this conversation. I think it's really important because there's a lot of information, but as much as information is out there, I think there's a lot of misinformation around this space. And it's going to take, I think, some new voices and some knowledge getting brought to these conversations for people just to think about this differently, right? Like, if they're really, I think, Stas, you're onto something. Like maybe like there's a SOC 2 light, and then there's like a robust SOC 2 report and they're different things, and it's important for people to think about that. So,
Absolutely.
Thank you for being here. Thanks for the chat, and I will talk to you guys soon. All right.